All right, so there we are. Vintage Masters, almost done for round one, but it's time for bonus magic. The Player of the Year, Jeremy Dezani, couldn't force the win in Game 2 against Paul Rietzl. He is waiting in the feature match area for you to watch Game 3, Game 4. Who knows how long they're going to play? This is just round one of 5 days of awesome. Keep those eyelids propped open, America, because Rietzl is battling for the win. Let's take a look.
Hey guys, welcome back to the booth. Let's waste no time. We've got a Game 3. It's effectively a Game 2 between Jeremy Dezani right now and Paul Rietzl. Let's head down to the feature match area. All right, you get to look at Paul there with a big smile on his face. He dodged
Paul's
a
the one
bullet.
who forced the draw, yeah. These are untimed rounds. That means, sure, they had a draw in Game 2. That just means they're going to play through to potentially Game 4. We keep playing it until somebody's got 2 game wins.
All right, so here's Basking Rootwalla, a quick start for Jeremy Dezani, currently ranked 2nd on the top 25 pro rankings. Paul Rietzl, number 16 on that same list, as Dezani cracks in there, uses up his mana not to develop his board, but to get in some extra damage and drop Rietzl down to 17 life. Now, Paul is playing one of the archetypes that you just saw talked about.
Green-white auras.
Green-white auras.
He looks like he's got a pretty good example of it, too. He's got 2 Armadillo Cloaks, a couple of Deathblade Elites, although he didn't get to play those early. He's got an Imperial Armor. He's got a Gaia's Embrace, 2 Armor of Thorns, just a ton of enchantments, and a ton of early creatures. But here, this is not the opening he's supposed to do, right?
He did nothing.
He did nothing on turn 1, and then he did Cycle the Claws on turn 2.
Yeah. His draw condition.
Wow, and then nothing on turn 3.
Yeah, nothing at all. And Dezani, though, has taken an interesting line here, too, because normally Dezani would be developing his board with creatures, but instead has just been dumping all of his mana into Basking Rootwalla and has knocked Paul Rietzl down to 14. And let's hit again and make it 11. Apparently, this is all Dezani needs.
Well, you see what Dezani's got untapped. Blue-blue. Anyone who played Magic in the 90s can tell you what blue-blue is representing.
Absolutely.
It's the top spell in Dezani's hand there. Counter spell.
And it's actual counter spell that is in Vintage Masters, the classic.
Oh, yeah.
And it is going to counter whatever Paul plays here, I would assume, unless it's something really insignificant.
Yeah, I mean, Paul basically had to draw with a bunch of enchantments, right? He's got the armor, the Imperial Armor, the Gaia's Embrace, but he didn't have a creature. So Urnimjin was the cheapest creature he had. Can't play that till turn 4, and yeah, snap counter, absolutely. Banged
out of there. So Jeremy Dezani is playing sort of this, like, if you know Delver of Secrets, it's kind of like that. It's 3 power attacker backed up by counter spells right now.
Paul did draw a Phantom Nomad that turn, though. I mean, he elected to do the more mana-efficient play of using all 4 for the Ernie. But he'll have a Nomad to follow up with.
Did you say Ernie?
Yeah, Ernie. We know each other from way back, first name basis.
Uncle Ernie.
Absolutely.
I like it. All right, so Rootwalla gets in for what will be its 12th point of damage. And that thing is just doing serious work here, as Rietzl's had a stumbly, slow start that had his first major threat countered. Can he actually stick something here?
What's Dezani got left? Yeah, I mean, he should be able to go Phantom Nomad and enchant it. Dezani's looking as threatening as he can, but yeah, gig is up. There's no second counter. Dezani just reaches over for the die. And Phantom Nomad, we talked about this earlier. Phantom Nomad combos particularly well with the enchantments because the way the Phantom ability worked from way back in Judgment, when the creature takes damage, you remove a counter. Well, let's say you've already removed both the counters, but it's still a 2/2 creature because it's wearing an Armor of Thorns, giving it +2/+2. Now, all damage gets prevented. There's no counter to remove, so the damage just plain gets prevented.
Right.
If you're out of counters but still alive for some sort of power toughness enhancing effect, you're essentially immortal.
So Paul elected not to play anything else with the Phantom Nomad, just ran it out there by itself.
That's interesting.
Could be thinking about Mana War. He knows that his opponent has 1 Mana War in his deck.
Also, there's an Ether Mutation in Dezani's list.
Ether Mutation as well, that's right.
There was also a second counterspell for whatever that's worth. I think Dezani would have countered the creature if he'd had it. But then again, we know Paul's hand.
5 cards in hand for Rietzl.
Dezani playing to try to force game 4. We talk about it. This is effectively a game 2, although Paul actually pointed this out at the table. It does matter for third tiebreaker purposes. Opponent's game win percentage. That's Sapperling Burst for Dezani.
So those are 7 fading counters?
7 fading counters. So basically, he can take counters off of Sapperling Burst in order to put creatures into play. If he pulled 1 counter off, it would be a 6/6 creature because it sees the fading counters, would fade down to a 5/5. Often the play is to make 2 4/4s, although sometimes your opponent has Seal of Cleansing, and Sapperling Burst is an enchantment, so you don't get nothing.
And when the burst goes away, the other ones are gone anyway.
All the creatures go away when the burst does, yeah.
So he can just fire it off.
Threat and answer.
Interesting. So Rietzl has to be happy with that little exchange. Looks like he's considering an attack, and he's going to attack because I think he's got a backup Phantom Nomad there.
Yeah, he does. He's been really slow with the creature enchantments. Paul definitely worried about the Mana War and the Aether Mutation that he knows about.
Wow. Here's Roar of the Worm, though.
Yeah, hard cast.
Yeah, that's scary because Rietzl knows that next turn he could easily be facing at least another worm plus in conjunction with some other spell. That happens pretty often, too.
Yeah, flashback on Roar of the Worm is only 4.
Yeah. So Rietzl back in the tank. He's at 8 life after a quick start from Jeremy Dezani, but has stabilized quite nicely.
And now here we're going to see
armor.
Here we're going to see exactly that sort of immortality play we talked about.
So talk to us about how this works functionally, because it's kind of a weird interaction you don't see every day.
Right. Paul can block Roar of the Worm forever. The first time he blocks, he'll lose a +1/+1 counter. The second time he blocks, he'll lose a +1/+1 counter. But that Phantom Nomad is still going to have +X/+X based on however many cards Paul has. And it keeps removing all of the damage, trying to remove a +1/+1 counter. There's no counter. Whatever. Damage is still prevented. He's effectively built a permanent blocker for that Worm token.
Now, the cool part about this interaction as well is that as long as the enchantment pumps its toughness at all, it can get this going. So even if Rietzl were to, say, go down to 1 card in hand, he could still have that interaction. Also, he gets to use the 2 counters. We see no attack here.
Yeah, Imperial Armor is not the best for the Phantom trick.
Right.
Because you really want to be attacking with your Imperial Armor creature. You want to stick Imperial Armor on like a Shadow or a Flyer and be just crunching over for 5, 6, 7 damage.
It did interestingly hold back that Worm, though. I think that Rietzl had a double block there at least. It might have even just been a single block at that point.
And now here's Armadillo Cloak.
Wow.
So
now
he can
that
actually
changes
attack.
things dramatically. I
So
think
2/2.
it's getting 4/4, so it's 4, so it's 6, 8, 8.
8/8, trample, lifelink, and oh, by the way,
It
even
really
if
can't die in combat.
Yeah, it can't die in combat. All it can do is shrink by 1.
Oh, man. That's going to be tough to race. Dezani has to scratch his head like, well, now what am I supposed to do? One of his bounce spells would be great, the Mana War, the Aether Mutation. I don't think he's got him, though, and this thing's going to make short work of Dezani if he doesn't find an answer quickly, plus make it essentially impossible for him to race it.
Yeah, I think you sacrifice Basking Rootwalla to trade it for a +1/+1 counter and prevent and not take 8. Oh, God, no, the trample. You still take 7.
Yeah, you're still taking most of it anyway.
Forgot about the trample.
I feel like the voices in Dezani's head as he's like, oh, crap,
Yeah,
I'm going to take
yeah.
7 anyway. What do I want to block here? And Paul looks coolly confident after this sequence. So Dezani right now, thinking about whether to block, but what he's really thinking about is, where does this game go from here?
Right.
If I start blocking, what happens?
All he's got in hand is an Owl Familiar and an Elvish Aberration.
I mean, taking 1 counter off, he probably better just waiting a turn to do it anyway, right? He can then soak up 2 more damage with 2 extra mana floating around and still get that counter off there. I mean, he does have a huge board.
Yeah, but what's he doing with it? It doesn't do anything.
No.
Before damage. I assigned 1 to that and 7 to you. Yeah, so and then I'm going to trigger the Armadillo Cloak. So you're going to end up taking 7, and I will gain 8, and I'll remove a counter.
You can hear how
Yeah. Let him do the play-by-play for us.
Yeah, I love that. Also, you notice he said I'll trigger my Armadillo Cloak. It's not lifelink.
Oh, right.
This is
The
before
keyword
lifelink was a
did not
keyword
exist at the
ability.
point where that card was printed. Yeah, I was talking to a lot of players coming into this tournament about who they thought was going to make the top 4, and Paul's name came up a lot. He's definitely a guy that these players have a ton of respect for.
He's so solid.
Yeah.
He just so rarely makes a mistake. He rings every bit of value that he needs to ring out. He finds
like
the
forcing the
lines.
draw in the untimed game
Yes,
too.
like that. That's a hard line to find, I think.
Yeah. He was apparently behind the entire game, the way I heard the story.
Is that right?
Behind the entire game, was going to get decked, but yeah, found the draw with the claws of
Yeah,
Wirewood.
he's the one that would do it. Paul's also incredibly good at knowing his role and when to change it. He will turn on a dime when he needs to. I think a lot of players fall into the trap of doing it maybe one turn too late, and he doesn't. His risk assessment is fantastic.
Man, I was worried about that Imperial Armor on a just ground dork, but Armadillo Cloak's trample ability turned that into a super threatening.
Looks like Dezani's asking a question. I can't.
Sounds like shelter.
Oh, they're speaking in French.
It's only for your creatures or mine too?
Oh, you should ask him.
Okay.
He's asking whether Shelter can. Shelter is target creature you control.
Yes.
Is the answer Dezani's looking for. And does he? Is that? Oh, he drew Gaia's Embrace. That's why this is relevant. Gaia's Embrace gives him the ability to make a giant regenerating blocker, or a trampling.
Which is going to be bigger, right?
Or a trampling attacker, as he prefers. Well, Paul's creature actually keeps getting bigger as Paul draws cards.
Right. But currently it would be a 9/9 worm.
9/9 trampling potential attacker as well.
True. I can't imagine that he can race Paul. They essentially have the same creature except for one has lifelink and the
You
other
want to know?
doesn't.
You know what Paul has in his hand though?
What does he have?
He's a Gaia's Embrace of his own. Which is oddly only +2/+2 because Imperial Armor goes down by 1, but still kind of funny.
Yeah. Wow. We call it Voltron mode. He's built a battle cruiser, and it is
Definitely.
ready for battle indeed. All right, there's Al's familiar there.
It's a bit of a tell from Dezani actually asking the question about Shelter. Why would he be asking? Right? It has to be because he drew his Gaia's Embrace.
Well, I thought it was interesting because he asked one of our head judges, Kevin Dupre, who's also French. And I'm assuming he asked him in French, and Rietzl said, that sounds like Shelter.
Yeah, that sounds like that's
So
exactly
maybe
what happened.
Dezani thought, this American guy, he's not going to understand. And Rietzl, you know, with a little bit of high school French. So it looks like Rietzl's French is
Up to the challenge.
sharp. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Dezani put Gaia's Embrace on the blocker. He attacked with the Tusker. Paul immediately blocked with the untapped Phantom, losing a counter, and then not taking 6, obviously. Dezani has built himself a 9/9 Regenerator in an effort to hold off Imperial Armored Armadillo Cloaked Phantom Nomad.
Welcome to the World Championship.
Yeah. So how big? It's 5, 6, 7. It's an 8/8 right now.
And he can put the Gaia's Embrace to give it +2/+2 effectively this turn.
He can get it to 10 if he plays the Embrace. He will not have Regeneration mana for whatever that's worth.
I think worth very
Not
little.
worth. Yeah, it's not worth much.
Yeah, I think if that's the play he wants, he can go for that, no problem. He's got other options in his hand, though.
Yeah, he can't. Sometimes you can shelter for unblockability, giving your guy protection from color to sneak through. Unfortunately, the blocker is green, and
Yeah.
shelter would make the Armadillo Cloak fall off. So
That's right.
that's not a super useful line.
Not awesome here.
How about we just play a flyer?
Yeah. So this makes some sense, though, because what Rietzl can do is
Dust Cloak Harrier.
he can jump up. He can sit here and be patient, build up cards in his hand until he's able to finally start attacking with his massive battle cruiser. And in the meantime, he can leave up that shelter mana just in case the Mana War or the Aether Mutation show up over on Dezani's side. I think that Rietzl's pretty convinced that Dezani doesn't have it now, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't draw it in the next few turns and take that battle cruiser offline.
Yeah, Paul's trying to leave up. You're absolutely right. He's leaving up shelter mana to guard against top decks. He's playing a flyer that he can potentially build a second Voltron.
Yes, he can diversify his threats out for sure. I mean, he's got to respect Jeremy Dezani's board. You know, he's got 2 6-powered creatures, and he can have another one coming too. So he's got to be careful.
Crazy game.
Yes. We didn't get to watch the game previous, but apparently it was also crazy, resulting ultimately in a draw.
It must have been.
Yeah.
We started 3 hours ago.
Yeah. Yeah, this has taken a while.
I mean, we had a draft and a build. I think the round started at least 90 minutes ago. I feel like we started before 11, though.
All right, there's Elvish Aberration now for Dezani.
head judge is encouraging Dezani to play a little faster. Yeah, the judges were, and the tournament organizer, Scott Larrabee, were very clear with the players last night at the player meeting. These are untimed rounds, but they're still planning to enforce slow play. If you're not playing at a reasonable pace, the judges will penalize you.
Yeah, Dezani's one of the more deliberate players, you know, at the highest levels. So
yeah,
I'm not surprised to hear that.
People were not surprised Dezani's match was the last one going.
Right.
All right. Gaia's Embrace on to the Harrier. Now Paul has a 5/5 flyer that he can attack with.
And it looks like his plan is just to chip away with this. I think he can hit twice. It's a little awkward that Dezani's sitting at 11 life as it's a 3-turn clock.
Well, he's got Armor of Thorns in his hand. He can kill him next turn. Oh, wow, and he's still got the Shelter mana.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, this is nice. I think Paul's got him.
It does feel like Paul is on the verge of winning his first match here, and it's a heck of a match, too. He is not getting anything easy here from Jeremy Dezani. You'll see that they've had a draw.
You block with the life linker, right? Yeah. Whatever. You can trample over for a couple.
He gains.
It's 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe that's a 6/6 Phantom right now.
And then I'm going to gain.
So Paul gains net 3.
So I gain 3 life total.
You're right. Yeah, I'll trade a counter for that.
Exactly.
And here's Roar of the Worm being flashed back from Dezani.
Yeah, Dezani knows he has to go on offense, even if it's not a particularly great attack.
Right.
Because he's going to die to the flyer, and he thinks 2 turns. Although we know Paul's got an Armor of Thorns that can just end it now.
Right, and it's actually pretty bulletproof here because Shelter can give protection from blue, which doesn't affect the...
Yeah. Counterspell would stop it, but that's about it.
That's right. And there it is. That's a lethal attacker, so Dezani...
Yes, sir. There's an owl in the way. Paul has to decide if he wants to go for pro blue. Although the owl doesn't matter with the trample, right? Isn't it still a trample over for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so he can trample for 6 even through the owl?
Yeah, and that's going to do it. Dezani has to extend the hand, and Paul Rietzl wins 2-0-1 over Jeremy Dezani.
Paul looks like he's on top of his game.
He looks real sharp.
He looks sharp.
That's scary, by the way, for the rest of the people in this field. If Paul Rietzl is dialed in and focused, you do not want to sit next to him at the other side of a game of Magic the Gathering. He is a machine.
Yeah, and I mean, when he's there, he is usually dialed in and focused. So I mean, I'm not surprised.
I'm
but
not either.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. He is capable of great things, and this could be the start that he needed. You know, barely scraping out that tie with the. What's it called?
Claws of Wirewood.
Claws of Wirewood, thank you. Yeah, and then eventually winning the second game to take it down. So, yeah, what a great round, by the way, of action here. Our first round included a Storm victory with something like 31 cards hitting the graveyard.
Oh, yeah.
We saw Balance for effect. But
one other thing, I got to throw this out there. We did see one piece of power opened.
That's right, and we
There
might
is a
get a chance to see it.
jet floating around the tournament.
I'm curious to see if that shows up on camera, too. But for now, why don't we head back to the news desk where Rich Hagan awaits.